In this 1950s photograph, school children practice a duck and cover drill. Following the apocalyptic destruction in Japan and the atmospheric tests of the early Cold War, global anxiety regarding radioactive fallout had reached a fever pitch. The United States government recognized a severe political problem. Public dread threatened to halt all atomic research and weapons development. To prevent this rejection, the United States Atomic Energy Commission, the federal agency responsible for managing the nation's nuclear arsenal, launched a highly classified multi-million-dollar public relations initiative. They called it Project Plowshare. The program sought to transform thermonuclear weapons into colossal, inexpensive tools for civilian construction and resource extraction. This is President Dwight D. Eisenhower, providing the ideological cover for the program during his 1953 address to the United Nations. He pledged to devote America's scientific might to ensuring atomic energy was consecrated to life, not dedicated to death. This speech, dubbed Atoms for Peace, provided the political shield to begin testing the domestic applications of nuclear explosions. Behind closed doors, AEC Chairman Lewis Strauss explicitly argued that demonstrating the friendly uses of bombs would build a global climate more tolerant of military testing. If the government could domesticate the blast, they could protect the weapons program from international test ban treaties. This is physicist Edward Teller, widely known as the father of the hydrogen bomb, and Project Plowshare's most zealous champion. Teller possessed a supreme confidence in human engineering. He traveled the country pitching nuclear devices to regional governments, famously telling an audience in Alaska, "If your mountain is not in the right place, drop us a card." He believed sheer explosive force could instantly solve the world's topographical challenges. Project Plowshare was a Cold War campaign to sanitize the world's most destructive weapon. Success required the public to view a multi-kiloton blast as a highly efficient earth-moving machine, capable of building harbors and canals at a fraction of the cost of conventional labor. For Project Sedan in July 1962, engineers lowered a 104-kiloton thermonuclear device exactly 635 feet beneath the Nevada desert. The detonation generates an intense thermal shock, instantly vaporizing the surrounding rock. This creates a high-pressure gas bubble that expands toward the surface, lifting an intact dome of Earth skyward before shattering it into debris. This aerial photograph shows the resulting scar. The blast displaced 12 million tons of Earth in a fraction of a second, carving a crater 1,280 feet across and 320 feet deep. In purely mechanical terms, Sedan proved that a single nuclear bomb could move mountains faster and cheaper than fleets of heavy machinery. But this image captures the immediate problem. The explosion generated a massive base surge and lofted a radioactive dust plume 5 kilometers into the atmosphere. The fallout cloud caught the prevailing winds and drifted northeast, directly over Utah, Colorado, and several Midwestern states. These dairy cows consumed the results. The Sedan plume deposited an estimated 880,000 curies of radioactive iodine-31 across Midwestern pastureland. Iodine-31 is a volatile isotope that easily enters the agricultural food chain through milk. Millions of Americans unknowingly consumed this milk, exposing children's thyroid glands to heavy doses of radiation. Project Sedan exposed a fatal flaw in the Plowshare initiative. The mechanics of nuclear excavation functioned as designed, but the dispersion of deadly fallout made the technology incompatible with civilian safety. Despite the contamination in Nevada, the AEC pushed forward with Operation Chariot. They planned to deploy Plowshare technology in a populated environment, carving an artificial deep-water harbor into the Arctic coastline at Cape Thompson, Alaska. This official map outlines the geometry for the harbor. The engineering plan required chaining together 5 thermonuclear devices. They intended to bury one massive central bomb to blast out the main turning basin, accompanied by 4 smaller 20-kiloton shots to carve a navigable entrance channel to the sea. This flowchart illustrates an ecological vulnerability. Arctic lichen absorbs fallout directly from the atmosphere. Caribou eat the contaminated lichen all winter, concentrating the isotopes in their meat. Finally, local indigenous populations who rely on caribou for survival consume it, absorbing radionuclide directly into their bodies. This photograph shows an Inupiat family from Point Hope, a village just 32 miles from the proposed blast zone. Refusing to surrender their ancestral hunting grounds, the villagers mounted a fierce resistance. Led by Inupiat elders, they launched the Tundra Times newspaper to unify native opposition and alert national environmental groups to the risks. Faced with intense scientific scrutiny and unrelenting grassroots pressure, the AEC abruptly canceled Operation Chariot in 1962. This victory demonstrated that organized citizens, armed with independent scientific data, could successfully halt federal nuclear ambitions and protect their ancestral lands. Rebuffed in Alaska, the AEC proposed the Panama Canal. This plan involved detonating over 200 hydrogen bombs in the Darien Isthmus of Panama to blast a new sea-level trench directly connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The plan failed the laws of geology. Central America's terrain is largely composed of wet, soft clay, subjected to continuous monsoon rains. Engineers realized that the steep nuclear crater walls would instantly trigger catastrophic landslides, blocking the new channel with mud and making maritime traffic impossible. This drill rig, photographed in New Mexico in 1967, represents the AEC's final shift into underground engineering. For Project Gas Buggy, they lowered a nuclear device 4,200 feet down a well. They hoped a contained blast would fracture impermeable impai and release massive trapped reserves of natural gas for commercial sale. The blast fractured the rock, but caused a chemical failure. The explosion generated tritium, a radioactive isotope of hydrogen that chemically bonds with other hydrocarbons. Tritium is notoriously difficult to separate from natural gas once mixed, meaning the radioactivity could not be filtered out. Subterranean models revealed that roughly 75% of the total tritium generated remained trapped in the geological formation. Because the gas could not be scrubbed, the millions of cubic feet recovered by the project were far too radioactive to sell to consumers. Neither deeper drilling nor different rock formations solved the core problem. A thermonuclear fission reaction inevitably poisons the exact resource it is attempting to extract. The signs carried by these 1970 Earth Day protesters reflect the changing national mood. By the early 1970s, the public was exhausted by the AEC's experiments. The modern environmental movement had taken root, bringing with it rigorous regulations and media mockery that branded the initiative Project Dubious. The financial accounting revealed a massive misuse of federal resources. Between December 1961 and May 1973, the United States detonated 35 nuclear devices across 27 separate Plowshare tests. In the process, the government burned through an estimated $700 million taxpayer dollars without ever delivering a viable commercial product. The physical landscape bears a permanent burden. Today, sites like Gas Buggy are perpetual Department of Energy legacy management zones. Because the subterranean rock and deep pools of radioactive melt glass cannot be cleaned, the government enforces rigid deed restrictions, legally barring anyone from ever drilling into the radioactive rubble below. The insult ran particularly deep in Alaska. Decades after Operation Chariot was canceled, researchers discovered that government scientists had secretly imported radioactive soil from Nevada and dumped it onto the Cape Thompson permafrost. It cost federal and state agencies millions of dollars to remediate the toxic soil left behind by the program. These tourists are staring out over the ultimate legacy of Project Plowshare. Driven by a hubristic desire to sanitize the bomb, the AEC spent hundreds of millions of dollars without delivering a single piece of usable infrastructure. Instead, the program left behind abandoned craters, thousands of gallons of radioactive waste, and a record of local resistance that would hold the nuclear establishment accountable for decades to come.